And we're continuing with the 13th chapter of the third book of A Tale of Two Cities. The name of the chapter is 52. The name of the book is The Track of a Storm. We join Charles Darnay right before his expected execution, with no thought at all for what Carton might be up to. He's counting the hours that he knows he will never hear again, walking regularly to and fro with his arms folded on his breast, a very different man from the prisoner who had walked to and fro at La Force. He heard one struck away from him without surprise. The hour had measured like most other hours. Devoutly thankful to heaven for his recovered self-possession, he thought, "There is but another now," and turned to walk again. Footsteps in the stone passage outside the door. He stopped. The key was put in the lock and turned. Before the door was opened, or as it opened, a man said in a low voice in English, "He has never seen me here. I have kept out of his way. Go you in alone. I wait near. Lose no time." The door was quickly opened and closed, and there stood before him, face to face, quite intent upon him, with the light of a smile on his features, and a cautionary finger on his lip, Sidney Carton. There was something so bright and remarkable in his look that for the first moment the prisoner misdoubted him to be an apparition of his own imagining, but he spoke, and it was his voice. He took the prisoner's hand, and it was his real grasp. "Of all people upon earth, you least expected to see me," he said. "I could not believe it to be you. I can scarcely believe it now. You are not—" The apprehension came suddenly into his mind. "A prisoner?" "No, I am accidentally possessed of a power over one of the keepers here, and in virtue of it I stand before you. I come from her, your wife, dear Darnay." The prisoner wrung his hand. "I bring you a request from her." "What is it?" "A most earnest, pressing, and emphatic entreaty, addressed to you in the most pathetic tones of the voice so dear to you that you well remember." The prisoner turned his face partly aside. "You have no time to ask me why I bring it, or what it means. I have no time to tell you. You must comply with it. Take off those boots you wear, and draw on these of mine." There was a chair against the wall of the cell before the prisoner. Carton, pressing forward already with the speed of lightning, got him down into it, and stood over him barefoot. "Draw on these boots of mine. Put your hands to them. Put your will to them, quick." "Carton, there is no escaping from this place. It can never be done. You will only die with me. It is madness." "It would be madness if I asked you to escape, but do I? When I ask you to pass out at that door, tell me, is it madness to remain? Tell me it is madness and remain here. Change that cravat for this of mine, that coat for this of mine. While you do it, let me take this ribbon from your hair and shake out your hair like this of mine." With wonderful quickness and with a strength both of will and action that appeared quite supernatural, he forced all these changes upon him. The prisoner was like a young child in his hands. "Carton, dear Carton, this is madness. It cannot be accomplished. It never can be. It has been attempted, and has always failed. I implore you not to add your death to the bitterness of mine." "Do I ask you, my dear Darnay, to pass the door? When I ask that, refuse. There are pen and ink and paper on this table. Is your hand steady enough to write?" "It was when you came in." "Steady it again, and write what I shall dictate. Quick, friend, quick!" Pressing his hand to his bewildered head, Darnay sat down at the table. Carton, with his right hand in his breast, stood close beside him. "Write exactly as I speak." "To whom do I address it?" "To no one." Carton still had his hand in his breast. "Do I date it?" "No." The prisoner looked up at each question. Carton, standing over him with his hand in his breast, looked down. "If you remember," said Carton, dictating, "the words that passed between us long ago, you will readily comprehend this when you see it. You do remember them. I know it is not in your nature to forget them." He was drawing his hand from his breast. The prisoner, chancing to look up in his hurried wonder as he wrote, his hand stopped, closing upon something. "Have you written forget them?" Carton asked. "I have." "Is that a weapon in your hand?" "No, I am not armed." "What is it in your hand?" "You shall know directly. Write on. There are but a few words more." He dictated again. "I am thankful that the time has come when I can provide them. That I do so is no subject for regret or grief." As he said these words, with his eyes fixed on the writer, his hand slowly and softly moved down close to the writer's face. The pen dropped from Darnay's fingers on the table, and he looked about him vacantly. "What vapor is that?" he asked. "Vapor?" "Something that crossed me. I am conscious of nothing. There can be nothing here. Take up the pen and finish. Hurry, hurry." As if his memory were impaired or his faculties disordered, the prisoner made an effort to rally his attention as he looked at Carton, with clouded eyes and with an allured manner of breathing. Carton, his hand again in his breast, looked steadily at him. "Hurry, hurry!" The prisoner bent over his paper once more. "If it had been otherwise," Carton's hand was again watchfully and softly stealing down, "I should never have used the longer opportunity. If it had been otherwise—" The hand was at the prisoner's face. "I should but have had so much the more to answer for if it had been otherwise." Carton looked at the pen and saw that it was trailing off into unintelligible signs. Carton's hand moved back to his breast no more. The prisoner sprang up with a reproachful look, but Carton's hand was close and firm at his nostrils, and Carton's left arm caught him round the waist for a few seconds. He faintly struggled with the man who had come to lay down his life for him, but within a minute or so he was stretched insensible on the ground. Quickly, but with hands as true to the purpose as his heart was, Carton dressed himself in the clothes the prisoner had laid aside, combed back his hair, and tied it with a ribbon the prisoner had worn. Then he softly called, "Enter there, come in," and the spy presented himself. "You see," said Carton, looking at him as he kneeled on one knee beside the insensible figure, putting the paper in the breast. Is your hazard very great?" "Mr. Carton," the spy answered, with a timid snap of his fingers, "my hazard is not that. In the thick of business here, if you are true to the whole of your bargain. Do not fear me. I will be true to the death. You must be, Mr. Carton, if the tale of 52 is to be right. Being made right by you in that dress, I shall have no fear. Have no fear! I shall soon be out of the way of harming you, and the rest will be far from here, please God. Now, get assistance and take me to the coach." "You?" said the spy nervously. "Him, man, with whom I have exchanged. You go out the gate by which you brought me in. Of course, I was weak and faint when you brought me in, and I am fainter now you take me out. The parting interview has overpowered me. Such a thing has happened here quite often, and too often. Your life is in your own hands. Quick, call assistance." "You swear not to betray me," said the trembling spy as he passed for a last moment. Man, returned Carton, stamping his foot. "Have I sworn by no solemn vow already to go through with this, that you waste the precious moments now? Take him yourself to the courtyard you know of. Place him yourself in the carriage. Show him yourself to Mr. Lorry. Tell him yourself to give him no restorative but air, and to remember my words of last night, and his promise of last night, and drive away." The spy withdrew, and Carton seated himself at the table, resting his forehead on his hands. The spy returned immediately with 2 men. "How then?" said one of them, contemplating the fallen figure. "So afflicted to find his friend has drawn a prize in the lottery of St. Guillotine?" "A good patriot," said the other. "Could hardly have been more afflicted if the aristocrat had drawn a blank." They raised the unconscious figure, placed it on the litter they had brought to the door, and bent to carry it away. "The time is short, Evremond," said the spy in a warning voice. "I know it well," answered Carton. "Be careful, my friend, I entreat you, and leave me." "Come then, my children," said Barsad. "Lift him and come away." The door closed, and Carton was left alone, straining his powers of listening to the utmost. He listened for any sound that might denote suspicion or alarm. There was none. Keys turned, doors closed, footsteps passed along distant passages. No cry was raised or hurry made that seemed unusual. Breathing more freely in a little while, he sat down at the table and listened again until the clock struck 2. Sounds that he was not afraid of, for he divined their meaning, then began to be audible. Several doors were opened in succession, and finally his own. A gaoler, with a list in his hand, looked in, merely saying, "Follow me, Evremond," and he followed into a large dark room. At a distance, it was a dark winter day, and what with the shadows within, and what with the shadows without, he could but dimly discern the others who were brought there to have their arms bound. Some were standing, some seated, some were lamenting, and in restless motion, but these were few. The great majority were silent and still, looking fixedly at the ground. As he stood by the wall in a dim corner, while some of the 52 were brought in after him, one man stopped in passing to embrace him, as having a knowledge of him. It thrilled him with a great dread of discovery. But, the man went on, a very few moments after that, a young woman with a slight girlish form, a sweet spare face, in which there was no vestige of color, and large, widely opened, patient eyes, rose from the seat where he had observed her sitting, and came to speak with him. "Citizen Evremond," she said, touching him with her cold hand,